Has everyone enjoyed the first TKO? And they clearly saved the best to last.
All right, so let's get started. So we're going to talk today about 5 ways to maximize misery with CSS. So my name's Vanston. I'm a UI developer within Spacely.
And I'm James, also a UI developer in Spacely.
There we go. So we're going to go through the 5 steps on how to actually create misery within CSS. And over the course of the talk, you should eventually unlock each stage of misery. So picture yourself right now. You're a happy developer. You love writing CSS each and every single day, and you come into work with so much glee. I know it might be hard to imagine this, but just for the talk, let's go with that. Now, maybe that isn't your objective. Maybe your objective is to be sad or miserable, even angry at the thought of writing CSS. Maybe you want to be like every other developer and be jaded and hate CSS and throw your hands up in the air at the thought of writing it. Well, if that's the case, this is a talk for you. So this talk will go over the 5 steps or build steps on the journey to CSS misery. So starting with Cascade. Cascading style sheets is in the name. So we should use Cascade absolutely everywhere, right? And I mean everywhere without question. I want you to flow your styles down from the parent everywhere. So where you might have some applications like this, where it's kind of trickling down, I want every single bit of CSS to come gushing down from the parent and absolutely obliterating your entire CSS structure. You will never know what will win the actual Cascade battle because CSS is so mystical. There's things what I like to call the cascading sorting hat. And it takes in things like importance, specificity, and source order to finally make the decision and allow the style to actually win. But forgetting literally all of that, the easiest way to be miserable with CSS and Cascade is to simply remove or move all your bespoke custom CSS from various different classes and selectors straight into the body. I mean everything. Just move it all up there and just delete every aspect of customization. This way, everything flows down. Look, you might get some stuff like this. Look, it doesn't quite look where we had it, but look, it looks pretty good to me, I think. And I think the objective here is that we'll never know where a style is coming from, and that sounds miserable. But also, we're almost certain of accidentally styling the wrong thing. And that, again, even more miserable. I think we're on our way. And so by doing so, we've now unlocked the first step. Now, going back to this example, maybe we actually want to clean up the stuff we've just broken. So another way we can actually go around that is actually to go back and for each and every single selector is actually just fix or initialize or unset the stuff we've just done. And this way, we can kind of get back there. We're kind of chipping away at the CSS selector, eventually getting it back to where we are. And that's great. As a side note, if you cascade down text decoration underline, it can never be removed. Like, it is down there, and no matter what you do, it is set for stone. So that brings us on to the next thing, specificity. Now, I want everyone to say this word on 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Specificity. Well, it's pretty good, actually, yeah. It's a hard word to say, and so I think this is aligning ourselves right well with misery. So moving on, developers love conflict, right? And I'm going to go and say out there, probably not. I think we tried to avoid it. And I think what we just talked about with Cascade, we kind of bring into the next topic of specificity. And with Cascade, I like to use the 3 C's, and that's Cascade creates conflict. I know we just said Cascade was amazing, but let's forget that for now. With Cascade, you can cause conflict, and we don't want that. So take this example here. We have a single class selector. It's pretty easy to read, pretty straightforward. But the bad thing is that you can easily override this. Like, that's horrible. We want you to never be able to override this ever again. So I much prefer this. So we're mixing in elements, we're mixing in IDs, we're mixing even wildcards. This way, you can never override this, even intentionally. This way, Cascade, the pesky Cascade is gone. And that sounds great and also miserable to me. So this couples our CSS to our HTML. So by changing either one of the two, we've virtually just broken it. And that sounds amazing and miserable again. So we're going to go into an interactive wizard time now, and we're going to talk about, we'll go over an example and find out why specificity isn't working in this case. And this kind of goes over like what CSS does behind the scenes. So given this example here, we have a lovely, or it should be a red title actually over on the right-hand side. And looking at our CSS, we've actually set it to color red already. So why isn't it working? So we can go over various different questions to kind of get there. Is there a difference in origin? So in this case, we're actually just loading a single style sheet in, so no, it's actually just one origin. Is there an inline style? Going back into the HTML, again, no inline styles, just classes, so it can't be that. Is one declared before the other? In our case, it's the last example, so one isn't. And finally, do they have different specificity? In this case, yes, they do. So the last CSS selector here, we have one directly above it with increased specificity. Now, the best and easiest way to fix this is obviously to jump straight into exclamation mark important, as we all were thinking. So by slapping this on, we've finally fixed our title. It is now red, and we're all happy. Woo! So we can use exclamation mark importance, but also we can use things like IDs and styles to also increase specificity. Also, attributes and pseudoclasses are lesser known, but they also do actually increase specificity over regular classes, which is actually interesting. Some of you may have seen this graph, and it's popularized by the CSS wizard, Harry Roberts. He talks about how CSS should increase specificity slowly over time in a style sheet and eventually ramp up when we have the shameful CSS, as he puts it. And I think this is absolutely wrong. He's got it wrong. But I think we need to flip this around and increase specificity as early and as fast as possible. I want those 10 selectors in the very first line, and I want you to have to keep on adding on selectors as if you were filling out your LinkedIn profile with attributes on what you're actually building out. And by doing so, we've now unlocked the actual second step of CSS misery.
Fantastic. Thanks. And as Aaron said, by now, you're probably starting to feel a bit sad. But you don't want to be just sad. You want to be the saddest saddo sailing on the sea of sadness. Downright miserable. And the way we start with that journey is with monolithic CSS. And we know the key to misery is cognitive overload. What does that mean? Have you ever tried to absorb a 2,000-line file of CSS? That is cognitive overload. So what I'm suggesting here is to move all your CSS into one massive unmaintainable file. And a further note onto this, it should be part of our hiring process. We give a candidate 2,000 lines and then ask them, what's on line 873? And if they can't answer, no deal. And just in case you're wondering, of course, it's margin left, negative 10 pixels. Important. So now we know what we're trying to do, but let's talk about what the benefits are of this. You no longer have to dig down into your folder and files looking for your CSS. It's all in the one spot. That's an increased efficiency. Your delivery lead will love this. And now that it's all in this one massive file, you're probably thinking, oh, what's the chances I get a conflicting selector? That is 110%. But just remember, if you have a conflicting suggestion, use points 1 and 2, override that with specificity. Hate it. I know a lot of teams out there use processes like SAS and less. Well, good news. Aaron and I, we did a bunch of research. Turns out they both support putting your CSS all into one file. It's like the industry knew this was the way forward. And enough talk. Let's have a look at an example here. So I've got this big file, and I've got a body selector in here somewhere. I know it's somewhere. So I'm just, you just scroll around. You know it's in there. All right, maybe it's not. I think it was around the 1,500 mark. Okay, no, that's all right. That's a different selector. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling. We got this. All right, I swear. No, okay. You know what? I'm just going to search for it. Okay, that's a class. You know what? Never mind. It doesn't matter. The point here is that you are becoming miserable. Look at that face. That is a concerned face. Which brings us on to the next misery pipeline step that you have now unlocked, fixed widths. And what does this mean? It's simple, really. People fear change. People like reassurance. People like routine. And if it is good enough for the survival of the human race, then it is surely good enough for web development. What does this mean? Do not use percentages. Or any flexible unit like Flexbox, Grid, VW, VH. What you really want to do is imagine tipping a concrete truck on top of your website so that it never, ever moves. So I said don't use percentages, but that's not very helpful. I want to suggest an alternative. Have you considered point? Point's usually reserved for when you want to print a website, but what if you do want to print realestate.com.au? I guarantee it'll look awesome. But here's the secret though. It's not about doing this here and there. You have to fix width and height everything for this to work. And what does that mean? That means you have a duty. And if you see a pull request from a colleague come in and they have not fixed everything, you decline that pull request into the 4th dimension. A final note, not a final note, I've got plenty more. Another point is, are we trendsetters or trend followers, you know? Like, literally no one else is doing this. We talk about innovation. Well, I think we can all agree this is innovation in its purest form. Well, that hurt to say. Before you can push your code out, there's a bit of a saying you're going to have to learn, almost a mantra. And that is, I don't know, it works on my machine. Because when you fix it so that it looks perfectly on your Mac Retina and your Mac Retina only, that is the only place it's going to work. Again, enough talk. I'm just going to show you what we really are trying to achieve here. This is your typical website. Yeah, responsive. Woo! Everyone's happy. How cool are ducks? Also terrifying. This is what we're trying to achieve. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Everyone has a mobile phone. We're used to scrolling. It's not that hard anymore. And it never changes. You can guarantee it's going to look this way on every screen. Oh. And again, one last thing before you push to production, you must ask yourself one simple question. Does your project manager hate you? If the answer to that is no, you have not fixed enough things yet. If yes, congratulations, you've moved on. To our final point in this misery pipeline, and that is generic class names. Whoops, that's the slide for that. Remember when I just said, you know, we trendsetters, trend followers, we should be unique, we should be like that? No, that's in the past. That doesn't matter anymore. When it comes to naming things, you should be as generic and, what's the opposite of unique? Ununique. Inunique. Immunique. As you possibly can. Naming conventions like BEM and CSS modules only prevent cascade. And like Aaron said, it's in the name of CSS. Oh my God. And if it's in the name, it must be so important that we use it everywhere. But I know, and we all know, naming is hard. We have this challenge every day, let alone naming a child. God. But fear not, Aaron and I teamed up with a bunch of underpaid researchers at MIT and have solved this issue for you with some guidelines. That random div that you need to add styles to, dot container. The parent of that random div that you need to override stuff, yeah, dot wrapper. And that bit of text in the divs that you don't know what to call, dot title. And if your code looks something like this, we'll give yourself a pat on the back. The real takeaway here is consistency is key. So let's, again, look at a demo with our favorite duck website. You can see here on the right, I have a bunch of text. We've got headers and anchor tags and H1s, and they're all using naming conventions that, all right, what we're going to do is realize they're all just text and just change them to title, because consistency is key. And when you just go refresh the page, well, you know, things happen. Look, you might get some unwanted styles, but maybe sometimes you might just add some styles you do possibly want. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Congratulations. You've unlocked the final step of the build pipeline. So let's just refresh. Your CSS cascades like Niagara Falls. Your specificity is just out of control and you can't override anything anymore. Your CSS is all in one massive file and it's impossible to find stuff. your website does not move and you're on the verge of going bankrupt and your class names are completely unmaintainable, you're probably feeling a bit like this right now. So, congratulations. Look, we know CSS is hard at the best of times. You know, a little cascade is good, but a lot will get you into trouble. However, the key here is moderation. And we do guarantee that if you have followed these 5 steps, you will be miserable. And just lastly...
Yep. So this talk is actually based off a couple of other ideas, and one of them was 7 ways to maximize misery, which is a video, and also how to be miserable, 40 strategies you already use. So this kind of empowers reverse psychology to hopefully get you over the line of writing maintainable and usable CSS. So rather than telling you what you should do with CSS, which you might immediately reject and think, I can do my own thing, we tell you what not to do in a funny kind of way. So hopefully you've all found this great, and now you know what to do to be miserable, and hopefully we can do the opposite. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it.
How fun was that? I don't write code, but that was hilarious.
Don't write that code.
Yeah.
Yeah, please don't, yeah.
Questions?
That's fair.
No questions? Yeah, you. Questions?
So I'm quite new to CSS. Do you have...
Oh, you poor thing.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm miserable already. So what's available at REA to help? Like, what resources can you recommend for a newcomer to not...
You've been here longer, mate.
Or do we have any, like,
It's probably good.
guidelines?
We don't have anything, maybe, or not that I'm aware of. Like, we have general guidelines, and a lot of the things are wrapped in other component libraries that kind of do that, but we don't really have CSS guidelines. That's kind of what maybe an issue is we don't really declare that. I know as part of our recruiting, we don't really kind of talk about it as much, and it's something that we're looking at to focus on more. So it's probably a good call out that we need to kind of build towards some sort of guidelines and structure, what's good and what's bad.
Yeah, it's kind of hard when teams sort of do things their own way. We use a mixture of CSS modules and style components, and they all have their own sort of unique quirks and different ways that they operate. It's kind of hard to sort of globally define that, but it's certainly something we should probably look at doing in the future to not make people terrified. Sorry. Drink o'clock.
Okay, no further questions. I won't hold you from drinks. We'll head down straight away. But before that, thank you, Aaron.
No worries.
Thank you, James. That was amazing.
Thank you.